You're standing in a dealership parking lot with $10,000 sitting in your bank account, and you came here with a plan. A used car, paid in full, no payments, no stress, simple, clean, done in 20 minutes. Then you see it. The truck, brand new, sitting under the showroom lights like it was built specifically to make every other car look pointless. Leather seats, a dashboard that looks like something out of a spaceship. The exact truck your neighbor drives. The one you've quietly wanted since the first time you saw it pull into his driveway. The salesman walks over before you even realize you've stopped moving. He's already smiling like he knows something you don't. He tells you the $10,000 works perfectly as a down payment. He tells you the financing is already approved. He tells you that you could be driving this thing home today, right now, this afternoon. And your brain does what every brain does in that exact moment. It starts doing math. $600 a month. You think about your paycheck, your rent, your bills. It's tight. It's a stretch. But it fits. Barely, but it fits. Here's what nobody tells you standing in that parking lot. The $600 isn't the real number. It was never the real number. And the decision you make in the next 10 minutes will look identical on the surface to another decision, one that ends somewhere completely different 10 years from now. My name is Nick, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time thinking about money, about the decisions that look small in the moment but aren't small at all once you follow them far enough down the road. If you've ever wondered why two people making the exact same monthly payment can end up in two completely different financial realities, stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly where that $600 goes and exactly what it becomes. So let's stop right there in that parking lot for a second, because this is where the whole story splits into two. In one version, you say no to the truck. You walk further down the lot, past the shiny stuff, to where the used cars sit without any spotlights pointed at them. You find something reliable, something boring, something that gets you to work and back without drama. You hand over your $10,000, sign a piece of paper, and drive away owning it. Completely. No bank has a claim on it. No payment shows up on the first of the month ever again. In the other version, you sign the papers on the truck. Same $10,000, except now it's a down payment instead of a full purchase. You drive off in something that smells like a new car commercial, and $600 becomes a permanent guest in your monthly budget, showing up every single month whether you feel like paying it or not. Here's the part that should stop you cold. In both versions, the exact same amount of money leaves your hands every month going forward. That's not a typo, and it's not a trick. Whether you bought the used car or the truck, there's $600 a month that either could go somewhere else or has to go to the bank. The dollar amount is identical. The destination is not. Think about that for a second, because most people never do. Most people compare buying a car to not buying a car. They don't compare buying a car to what else that same money could have been doing this entire time. And that comparison, the one nobody makes standing in a dealership, is the one that actually decides how the next 10 years of your life go. Because here's what almost nobody considers in that parking lot. If you take the used car route, you're not obligated to spend that $600 a month on anything at all. It's yours, free and clear. Which means you could, if you wanted to, take that exact same $600, the same amount you would have paid the bank, and instead hand it to yourself. Or, more specifically, to your future self. That one decision made in a random parking lot on a random afternoon creates two timelines that look almost identical for the first few months. Same income, same job, same $600 leaving the account. You'd have to look really closely to see any difference at all in year one, but money doesn't care about how similar two situations look on the surface. Money only cares about where it's sitting and what it's doing while you're not paying attention to it. And once you understand what $600 a month can actually turn into when it's left alone to grow instead of handed over to a lender, you're going to look at that parking lot moment completely differently. Let's actually do the math, because this is the part that changes how you see every single purchase you'll ever make again. Take that $600 a month, not spent on a payment, not spent on anything. Just invested consistently every single month into something simple like an index fund earning an average of 8% a year. That's not some exotic strategy. That's not insider knowledge. That's the most basic, unglamorous investing move that exists, and it's available to literally anyone with a bank account. Run that for 10 years and you land somewhere around $110,000. Sit with that number for a second, because it doesn't feel real the first time you hear it. $600 a month for 10 years is $72,000 of your own money going in, but you end up with $110,000. That extra $38,000 didn't come from your paycheck. It didn't come from a bonus, a side hustle, or a lucky break. It came from nothing. It came from time. By year 5, something shifts. The money you invested early isn't just sitting there anymore. It's been quietly generating its own returns for years, and those returns are now generating returns of their own. By year 10, that pile is doing more heavy lifting than you are, and it never once felt the absence of a truck, never complained about riding around in a used car, never noticed that you didn't upgrade. Which raises an obvious question. If this same $600 a month can quietly turn into 6 figures just by being left alone, what exactly is happening to the $600 a month on the other side of that decision, the one going to the bank instead? So let's follow that same $600 into the other version of your life, the one where you drove home in the truck. Every single payment you make gets split into 2 pieces before it ever touches the actual price of the truck. One piece chips away at what you borrowed. The other piece, and this is the part dealerships never put on a big sign in the showroom, goes straight to the bank as interest. Pure profit for someone else, generated entirely from your monthly paycheck. It doesn't upgrade the engine. It doesn't add a single mile to how long the truck lasts. It just disappears into the financial system. But the interest isn't even the worst part. The worst part happens the moment you drive off the lot, and it happens instantly. New vehicles lose somewhere between 20 and 30% of their value in the first year alone. Not over time, almost immediately. For a significant chunk of the loan, you can owe more than the truck is actually worth. If life throws something at you, an accident, a job change, a sudden need for cash, and you have to sell that truck, you'd have to write a check just to make up the difference between what it's worth and what you still owe. Meanwhile, on the other timeline, none of this exists. There's no gap between what's owed and what's worth, because nothing is owed. There's just money, sitting in an account, growing instead of shrinking. 2 identical $600 amounts, leaving 2 identical bank accounts every single month. One quietly builds your wealth, the other quietly builds the bank's. The monthly payment. That's the only number that ever gets talked about in that showroom, and it's not an accident. It's the entire strategy. Think back to the moment you did the math in your head standing in that parking lot. You didn't calculate the total cost of the truck. You calculated whether $600 fit into your paycheck. And it did. Barely, but it did. That's the exact question the entire sales process is engineered to make you ask. Because it's the only question with an answer that feels comfortable. Here's what used to be true, not that long ago. Car loans lasted 3 years, maybe 4 if someone really needed to spread things out. That was normal. That was the ceiling. Nobody offered anything longer because nobody needed to. Now, walk into almost any dealership and you'll find loans stretched to 6 years, 7 years. Some lenders will hand you paperwork for 8, and it's not framed as a red flag, it's framed as flexibility, as an option built for you. Take that same $40,000 truck, squeeze it into 4 years, and the payment might land somewhere around $900 a month, a number big enough to make most people hesitate, maybe even walk away. But stretch that exact same loan out to 8 years, and suddenly the payment drops to something like $600. A number that fits, a number that feels reasonable, a number that gets a signature. Same truck, same price, different calendar. Spread across 8 years instead of 4, the total amount paid climbs by thousands of dollars. All of it interest, all of it collected specifically because the loan now has more time to accumulate it. And there's a second cost hiding inside that stretched timeline. The longer the loan, the longer you stay in that dangerous zone where you owe more than the truck is worth. 4 years gives depreciation a limited window to outpace your payments. 8 years gives it far more room to run wild, so the payment feels smaller. The decision feels easier, which brings up something most people never even consider when they're excited about a payment that finally fits. What happens if, 3 or 4 years in, you get tired of the truck, or bored, or you just want something newer? Aqui está com o corte de 35% aplicado, mantendo o exemplo dos 22.000, 17.000 reais, e a mecânica de rolar a dívida, cortando as repetições do conceito de negative equity. That question isn't hypothetical. Most people don't drive a financed vehicle until the last payment clears. They get restless, or a newer model catches their eye. And that's exactly where the trap hiding inside long loan terms springs shut. Say you're 3 or 4 years into that 8-year loan. You still owe, let's say, $22,000. But the truck sitting right there on the trade-in lot is only worth $17,000. That $5,000 difference doesn't disappear just because you're ready to move on. It follows you. That $5,000 gets rolled directly into the financing for your next vehicle. Not paid off, not settled, just quietly added onto a brand new loan that already comes with its own price tag, its own interest, its own depreciation curve starting from zero. Your new loan didn't start at the sticker price. It started $5,000 higher before a single new payment even hit the calendar. Trade in again in another 3 or 4 years, and there's a good chance you're rolling forward yet another gap, this time on top of the one you just carried over. The debt doesn't reset. It compounds in the wrong direction, growing heavier with every trade instead of lighter. From the outside, none of this is visible. You just look like someone who upgrades trucks every few years, always driving something recent. But the loan balance tells a different story than the driveway does. Meanwhile, on the other timeline, there's no truck to trade in, no gap to roll forward. Just the same account, still adding $600 a month, completely unaware that somewhere else, an identical $600 is now funding a debt that never actually gets smaller. Which raises the real question. If trading in early is this damaging, why does almost nobody see this coming before they sign? Because nobody in that showroom is selling you a vehicle. They're selling you a version of yourself, and that version is a lot harder to walk away from than a piece of metal on 4 wheels. Think about the last truck commercial you actually remember. Mud, mountains, a sunset, a man climbing terrain that looks nothing like the parking lot at your job. That image is doing something very specific to your brain, something car companies have spent decades and untold amounts of money figuring out how to trigger on command. People don't make purchasing decisions with a calculator. They make them with an identity. Here's the switch that flips the moment a vehicle becomes about who you are instead of what it does. $600 a month on almost anything else in your life would get scrutinized. $600 a month on clothes gets called an issue. But $600 a month on a truck barely raises an eyebrow because somewhere along the way, that specific category of spending got wrapped in a story about being responsible, about deserving something nice after working hard. Nobody questions the $600 once it's attached to a story like that, including you. This is exactly why the same amount of money invested quietly every month feels boring, almost forgettable, while that same amount financing a truck feels significant, even admirable. Once that emotional layer is in place, you stop asking what this truck actually costs over its lifetime and start asking whether you deserve it. Only one of those is a financial question. This is precisely why dealerships never lead with total cost of ownership or depreciation curves or the real math on interest over 8 years. They lead with the mountain, the sunset, the man who looks like he's never once worried about a monthly payment because that's not competing against a used sedan. That's competing against who you picture yourself becoming. Which means the real question was never whether $600 a month fits your budget. The real question is what else that $600 is quietly paying for on the other side of the equation, because the truck payment was never really $600 a month. That number was just the entry fee. A brand new truck, especially one loaded with trim and tech, costs meaningfully more to insure, comprehensive coverage, collision, the extra protection any lender requires, easily over $200 a month on its own. Maintenance adds more on top, bigger tires cost more to replace, advanced electronics cost more to diagnose. A simple brake job can run into the hundreds. Anything involving the transmission climbs into the thousands. Add fuel, a truck getting real-world mileage around 15 miles per gallon can push past $300 a month on a normal commute. Put it all next to each other, and the truck that looked like a $600 decision in the parking lot is actually funding a monthly lifestyle closer to $900, sometimes higher. Almost nobody budgets for any of this before they sign, because the entire decision got made around one number, while every other cost stayed invisible until the first insurance bill, the first repair, the first month the tank needed filling twice. Meanwhile, the used car in the other driveway carries none of this weight. Cheaper to insure, cheaper to fuel, cheaper and more predictable to maintain. The real gap between these two choices was never $600 versus $600. It was $600 invested, quietly compounding, against closer to $900 spent, quietly disappearing into categories nobody accounted for on the day the decision got made. Let's actually put both years side by side, because up until now this has all been theory, and theory is easy to nod along to without really feeling it. Year one looks almost identical from the outside. Same income, same $600 leaving both accounts every month. One person has a small pile of money slowly building in an investment account, barely enough yet to feel impressive. The other has a truck in the driveway, insurance paid, tank full, loan current. From the street, you'd assume the one with the truck was doing better. You'd be wrong, but you wouldn't know that yet. By year 5, the gap starts showing. The investment account has grown into real money, tens of thousands of dollars, compounding whether anyone's watching it or not. The truck is 5 years in, no longer new, no longer turning heads. The loan balance has come down some, but depending on what happened with trade-ins along the way, there might be a second loan layered underneath, carrying forward a gap that never actually closed. By year 10, it's impossible to ignore. One side has a portfolio sitting somewhere north of $100,000 built entirely from money that was simply left alone. The other side has a 10-year-old truck worth a small fraction of what it originally cost, alongside a decade of insurance, fuel, repairs, and possibly more than one loan's worth of interest paid to more than one bank. Same income the entire time. The gap wasn't created by one big dramatic mistake, no reckless spending spree, no obvious red flag. It was one decision, made in a matter of minutes in a parking lot, that quietly determined which of these two endings was going to happen. Which raises the real question. What happens to someone who repeats that decision more than once? Because that's exactly what tends to happen. Almost nobody stops at one truck. A few years in, boredom sets in. Or a new model catches the eye, and the whole cycle quietly restarts from the beginning. Every time a new loan begins, depreciation begins right alongside it, at its steepest, fastest point. Trade in every 3 or 4 years, and you spend your entire relationship with vehicles living inside that steepest, most expensive stretch of the depreciation curve, never reaching the calmer years further down the line. The interest does the same thing, always heaviest early in any loan, which means restarting constantly keeps you permanently in the most interest-heavy portion of the schedule, paying the bank disproportionately more year after year. Picture it like running on a treadmill someone keeps resetting to the beginning right as you're finally hitting a rhythm. You never get the payoff of momentum because the moment momentum starts building, the whole thing resets and you're back at zero speed again. The investment account has no reset button. Every month adds to what's already there, and every month that passes lets the money already inside keep compounding without interruption. This is the real cost of trading in a truck every few years. Not just the negative equity rolling forward, not just the fresh depreciation hit. It's that you never get to experience what money looks like when it's finally allowed to run long enough to start compounding hard. Which brings up something that might sound surprising. None of this actually means you're supposed to never own the truck, because the goal was never to convince you that trucks are bad or that wanting one makes you reckless. What actually changes once you understand all of this isn't the truck. It's the order everything happens in. Go back to that account sitting quietly for 10 years, the one that grew past $100,000 without ever needing a single truck payment to get there. That number isn't just a pile of money sitting still. It's an option that didn't exist 10 years earlier. Because now, 10 years later, buying that exact same truck outright, in full, no loan, no $600 payment, no interest, no depreciation trap waiting 3 years down the road, is completely possible using nothing but the growth that money produced on its own. Not the original amount put in, just the profit sitting on top of it. Notice what's different about that version of owning the truck. There's no bank involved. There's no monthly payment competing with rent or groceries. There's no gap between what's owed and what it's worth, because nothing is owed at all. The truck stops being a financial decision and just becomes a purchase, made in cash, by someone who could walk away from the dealership at any point in the conversation without losing anything. That's the actual difference between the two people from that parking lot, 10 years apart. It was never about who was allowed to want a nice vehicle. It was about which one of them let the wanting happen first, before the money had time to grow, and which one of them let the money grow first and let the wanting happen on their own terms. So if you're standing anywhere close to that parking lot moment right now, here's what actually matters. Stripped down to the parts that make the difference. If you can pay in cash, pay in cash. That single choice removes interest, removes the depreciation trap, removes the possibility of ever owing more than something is worth. If that's not realistic right now, the length of the loan matters more than almost anything else in that conversation. 3 years. 4 at the absolute most. Anything longer isn't flexibility. It's a longer relationship with a bank and a longer window spent underwater on something losing value faster than you're paying it down. Before any of that, decide what the maximum payment is that you'd actually be willing to make on a vehicle, whatever that number is for your life. Then, before spending a single dollar of it on a car, start putting that exact amount into an investment account instead, every single month, and let it run. Let your future catch up to the version of yourself that wants something nice, instead of borrowing from that future self to get it sooner. And if a loan is already sitting there, already signed, already underway, the rule that matters most going forward is simple. Never carry a balance from one vehicle into the next. Close one chapter completely before opening another. Because every single time a gap gets rolled forward into a new loan, it doesn't disappear. It just moves, quietly getting heavier, into a story that looks fresh but never actually started at zero. You never actually walked away from that decision. Not really. It's still sitting there playing out in real time, whether you're the person who signed for the truck or the person who walked past it toward the used cars in the back of the lot. Same income the whole way through. Same $600 leaving your account every single month, no matter which version of that afternoon you chose. Nothing about your paycheck determined which future you ended up living in. The only thing that ever decided it was where those $600 were allowed to go and what they were allowed to become while nobody was watching. So here's the only question that actually matters now, the one that was never really about trucks or used cars or interest rates at all. Somewhere out there, right now, there's a version of you making that same $600 decision this month, whether or not there's a dealership involved. The question is simply this: which one of those two accounts is it actually feeding?